if we come to the point where the city has a tentative agreement with the Flames for a new arena, that we should proceed, council should then vote on that deal and go from there. Do you think there should be any further public consultation before council votes on whatever the arena deal will or will not be?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's very hypothetical because there's a lot of road. There's a lot of road to go down before we get to that point. My bias has always been, as we saw with the Olympics, as we saw with the last arena deal, that we ought to be doing as much of this stuff in public as possible. And certainly the history of arena deals in different cities has not been that, right? These things tend to be presented as fait accompli to the public. I'm not sure that there's much space for public consultation because ultimately it's one project. We don't do a ton of public consultation on an interchange, for example. But I think it would be very interesting to hear from the public on what they think the right amount of public participation in this should be. And certainly there'll be an opportunity for the public to have their voices heard, but it might not happen until there's something on the table.
But once there's something on, let's say there's a tentative agreement, between the city negotiators and the Flames, would you see, you said it may not be that much consultation before there's a council vote. If there is,
I didn't say that, but I think that is right, yeah.
Yes, but so you're not looking at open houses. It won't be like the Olympic bid.
Yeah, I don't know that, this is going to sound funny, right? Which is that although it's a ton of money and it's a big decision for us, in a multi-billion-dollar capital budget, the amount of money that we're talking about is not that huge. It's not like the Olympics, where you really want to have a very, very robust conversation about it. It's one building. So, I don't see open houses or stuff, but really, a lot of that depends on what the negotiating partners want to do. I wouldn't mind, doing more of this in public and having a good conversation with the public about public benefit, but I suspect that's likely not the way it'll go.
Well, how do you think it will go? It'll just go from a tentative agreement to a council vote and debate? Like, will there be a public hearing? No, there's no public hearings on it.
It's so hypothetical right now. You know me, I never avoid questions.
Right.
But on this one, I really have no idea because I haven't been party to any of these conversations, and I don't even know where the parties are at.
Can you explain this $10 million cost, sir, and how it relates to provincial legislation?
Sure. Every employer in Alberta has been seeing their WCB claims and their premiums rising. And so the city, being a thoughtful employer, really wants to figure out ways to both contain costs and to bring people back to work as soon as possible, because that's the right thing to do for a human being too, rather than have them sit at home. Bring them back, have them doing something meaningful as soon as you can. The legislation provides some deadlines on this, but frankly, it's work that we need to do anyway. And this $10 million is just setting aside a little bit of money to make it easier for us to be able to bring people back to work quicker.
I understand the virtue of it, but for workers and for accommodating people back on the job, but it does sound like we're trying to avoid some costly penalties, isn't that part of it?
That's right. To be very cold-blooded about it, if you, God forbid, crash your car and your insurance your premiums go up the next year, WCB is like that. The longer you have people out, the more your premiums will go up. And in addition to that, if you're seen to be acting, not in the best intentions with those employees, then you could also pay very costly penalties. So this isn't really a $10 million cost, it's avoiding much more than that.
Can you give
potentially.
Can you give an example? Because as it was said, if you're coming off of long-term disability or recovering from a workplace injury, the city said, okay, we'll be welcoming you back. But what's different between how things are done today procedurally versus what will happen if this is approved by council?
Okay, so here's a hypothetical. Okay, I'm totally making this up. But let's say that you're a bus driver and you receive an injury and you can't drive a bus anymore, but we want to put you to work in the Calgary Transit call center. In the old days, we would wait until a position was available in the call center if someone was on vacation or someone else was going on leave so that you could fill that and there'd be a little less cost to the city, but you'd be on WCB for longer. And under the new system, what we would do is we would find you a position, even create you a position in that call center much more quickly while you were recovering and getting back to your regular job.
And of course, as soon as you say create a position, people people outside this building would say. So
What?
You're going to find a desk somewhere and you're going to set, Bob or Sue down there, and they're not going to do anything.
Well, the reason I use that particular example is anyone who's called the Calgary Transit Call Center knows that you could always use more people there in order to provide better customer service. So it really is about providing better service to citizens and not getting hung up on red tape.
Is there an element here, though, of the province imposing some new, within 3 days you have to have them in a new job? Is that hard for the city to maneuver an employee into a job that has barely been sort of outlined?
Yes and no and yes. Certainly the new legislation is restrictive. However, I don't want to blame the province for this. On the other hand, it is the right thing to do. All of us, every one of us who works, pays into that system of the workers' compensation, and it's important to make that system work better. And you got to put a stake in the ground at some point. That said, 3 days seems to me to be a little bit over the top. But that said, it's not hard and fast. There's always room for negotiation, and the city will also always act in the best interest of both the city and the employee.
Do we get into any issues with the union and saying, hey, my guy's too qualified to be answering the phone, pay him at home until he's ready to do his real job again?
We haven't had a ton of problems with that because I think our bargaining units, our unions also see the value in helping people do meaningful work. But of course, those are conversations we continue to have.
Any estimate how many people fall in this category in the course of a year in a company, corporation this size?
I don't know those numbers. I heard today that about 900 WCB claims a year, but some small portion of those would fall into this situation. I might have that wrong, so I shouldn't be quoted on that. I might have misheard.
I was going to say, do you think it's dozens a year? Like coming back to work, is it hundreds?
Maybe that's a question we could get answered for you.
Yeah,
I thought
really
they
don't
said
know.
900 accommodated a year.
Yeah, 900 accommodated, but not all of those would fall into this category of folks who had to be accommodated in a shorter period of time. So I really don't know.
We'll follow up, Scott.
But I want to say that the rest of that report was really, really interesting because what that really showed was that the city, after dealing with the economic downturn, has really managed itself very, very well. We've cut headcount. We've found hundreds of millions of dollars in budget savings, both on the operating and the capital side. And we've done that while maintaining very high standards of customer service. And we continue to do that. This era of continuous efficiency improvement is something that I really pushed for when I was first elected, and it's really starting to bear fruit. It can't go on forever because eventually you have to get to the bone. But I think that it's really shown us very well that we've been able to keep the lid on taxes and maintain very high services by fighting these inefficiencies. And I'm very proud of my colleagues that they've been able to do that.
But has Mr. Fielding been too overzealous, like when you gave the example of the summer student hires?
I mean, look, we're talking about hundreds of millions of savings, in which I think maybe $1 million was going a bit too far. But that's better to go a bit too far than not go far enough.
Do you know how many of the employee reductions, how many actually resulted in layoffs of the 508?
I believe that is actually in today's deck using some bureaucratic language. I think the number is in the 100 to 200 range, but we can find you the real number as well.
And do you know, he outlined how much money has been saved, and he also touched upon some of the projects that that money has been redirected to. Do you know how much money in cash remains?
I'm getting all kinds of CFO questions today. Yes, I do know, but it's not an easy answer because there are areas of cash in different buckets. And certainly one of the things we're talking about as we're developing our capital strategy around these large capital projects is how much of that cash is actually accessible cash. So those numbers will be coming soon.
Can I ask you a city manager question?
Yes.
I was just aware with Jeff Fielding down there that must be one of the last times we're going to get to see him. What is the timeline? Do we know when he's making his formal exit, and where are we in terms of finding whoever the next Mr. Fielding is?
So announcements are forthcoming on timing, and you'll hear those very quickly. The new city manager selection committee has been set. Myself, Councillor Sutherland, and Councillor Davison will serve on that committee. Our first meeting is this week.
Last meeting, from in camera, you guys picked an interim person, but council said we couldn't do anything until you had some pomp and ceremony to announce who's interim.
Until we finalize the contract. So soon, soon, soon.